I was so worried I was going to mix up drones and mites all the time because you say it over and over and over again, and it starts going, phew, 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 and you can't say it right. So if I made that mistake, I apologize. All right, we're good to go. My name is Shannon LaGrave, and I am here for my Master Craftsman test. And I just presented on drones, but we are going to be talking actually about the American Honey Show Training Council. This is a really cool talk. I actually got the privilege of designing this after I had been able to sit under a couple of these people as they worked, and as I had entered into the first level training council training, then I got to do the presentation as associated with this. Oh, here we go. So, there we go. Let's start with what it is. What is the American Honey Show Training Council? Most of you have probably never heard about it. I went 2 slides. There we go. Yeah, you're right. Most of you have never heard of it. Well, let's start with the honey show. A honey show is something most people are familiar with. Originally, when the honey show started, the idea was that this was the Middle Ages, the Dark Ages, ancient Europe, essentially. There were lords, and they took taxes on everything someone sold. And honey was actually a higher taxed item because it was considered very valuable. You didn't make as much of it. What they did was they would have a couple days a year where taxes were not being paid. Like, you didn't have to pay taxes. So of course, everyone's going to bring their highest taxed item to market and say, look what I've got. And so they're going to bring honey to there. Well, everybody's bringing honey. So suddenly they're like, no, but my honey's the best. And therefore, the start of the honey show. And that is still true today. So the American Honey Show Training Council was originally part of the Welsh Honey Judges. And what they do is they actually train judges, exactly as their name implies. They train judges to do a good job, to know what they're looking at across a large board. And I stepped into this by accident. What happened was I needed a credit, ironically, for the Master Beekeeping Program. This is why it's got value, is because then you try stuff you wouldn't otherwise try. And I was trying to figure out what to do, and they were like, how do you feel about judging honey? And I'm like, I've done judging honey. I know how to judge honey. I've judged honey for most of my life, and for at least the past 20 years. So I've been a honey judge and or assisting with it for decades at this point. And I'm like, yeah, sign me up. I can go do honey. I need this credit. And so I went in and I came in and I'm like, oh, everybody's in a white lab coat and a silly hat, a derby hat. And I'm like, what's going on? And they're like, oh, we're the American Honey Show Training Council. I'd never heard about them at all. And so I sat down and I started just working, and I got to sit with, as a steward, their head judge. And it wowed me, because I've been a honey judge for years, but the meticulousness and care and real depth of knowledge that they showed while judging honey made me go, I want to know more about this, which is why this was developed. So number one, they're a training group. You can see this here. It's actually Steve Jensa at the NABI Association this past January. And what he's doing is he has a whole group of new people who are sitting there learning how to read a sheet, learning how to look at a bar of wax and evaluate it, learning how to look at a jar of honey and evaluate it, and to decide what is the best standard quality that is available. Because what you're doing is you're looking at all these hundreds of beautiful products, but you're looking for the highest quality with the least flaws in it. And I have a couple of examples of what that will look like later today. But an actual training for this, it sounds weird to say that you train for it, but what I learned is in this training is that if you are trained to be a honey show judge or a judge in general, it is about following the rules. It is about seeing what the community, how they do it, and adapting to that, and selecting the highest quality and standard. And it doesn't matter what you're judging, whether you're judging livestock, crafts, or honey, you can do a good job if you have proper training. Now, one of the things is the different positions. So they have different positions within this. There are 4 basic positions. You have steward, and you have undersecretary. Then you have a head secretary, or actually stewards kind of cover all trainees. So anybody who's a trainee who's walking around learning it is a steward. They may work under a secretary, or they may work under an actual judge. Then you have the judges, the secretary, and the head judge. So that's 4. So stewards, secretaries, and head judge, as well as the under judges. Now, it's not to say that this is a necessary thing, but the Honey Show Training Council has this for a reason. The head judge is the person who makes the decision. So he's going to say if something went wrong, or if we need to make a judgment call between these two potential first places, he's going to be the one who has the final say in it. If there's a logistical problem, he's going to be the one who has the final say in it. But there's also the under judges who are oftentimes sitting down, doing the work, and often learning under the head judge as well. It is an apprentice program. You are learning as you go. And then the secretary. Secretaries are incredibly valuable. So duties of a secretary. First thing that you should know about a secretary is that they're usually a type of person who's meticulous. They're a type of person who keeps track of details, who wants to know how everything is running, what's going on. Our secretary at the last Honey Show that I participated, Barbie, is definitely that type of person here at the Texas Honey Show. But it's profound. They have to know how everything works. And the number one thing the head judge said to me whenever we talked about secretaries is he says, if you find somebody who's good at this job, who loves doing it with a passion, take care of them. They are the most valuable cog. You need them. They are so important to everything that we do. So I cover the secretary first because the head judge, regardless of name, was like, the secretary's where it's at. You have to have a good secretary. You have to have that person who's detail oriented. So they're going to keep the master list. They're going to make sure that when people turn in their product, they have the names for the ribbons, they have the names for who's turning in what category it's going in, and they're keeping track of all of that. Not only that, but they're protecting you from mistakes. They're protecting you from double entries. They're protecting you from flaws whenever somebody is bringing an item up and it's not correct. So they are really the first line of defense. Now, stewards. Stewards are really important. They're usually the trainees. So this is actually the Texas Honey Show last year, and you'll see Pam over here on the far left. And Pam was the head judge in this case. She was brought in, but if you look straight back, you're going to see Monica. She has the cowboy hat on. And so Monica is actually our only Texas Honey Show Training Council judge here that lives in the state currently. But we have other stewards. We have Danielle Fioletto. We had Kim Townsend, myself, Katie Capehart. All of us participated in this. And what we were there doing was learning. We basically were parked to watch the judges, to give them anything they needed, but to learn. And I've had the opportunity to work with a really wonderful lady, and we sat down and they show you how to look at an item, all the things to consider. And it's usually an activity of conversing, of training while you're doing it. So it's like getting a credit hour. Very important. So I'm not going to cover the head judge as much, but the head judge is essentially part of organization. They're there to make the final call. If they have somebody who's unhappy about how something was judged, they're the person who deals with the difficult people. They're also the person who's in charge of coordinating, talking to the group that they're working with. So for instance, if they're coming in and working with the Texas Honey Association, or if they're working with Real Texas Honey on the Honey Show, however it's being done, they're going to coordinate with the people running that show. And they're going to make sure that the rules are working together and everything is being done as the directors want it to be done. So they're listening to the program they come in under. They may be judges, but they're there to coordinate together with the pre-existing community to make sure that what we're doing is pleasing the people we're working with. Now, the next part is how it's run, how it works, because there's a system in place. That's something that I found was very lacking between honey shows here in Texas. I personally, as I said, have been a part of many honey shows, some of them really well run, some of them not as well run, both before and after learning about this. But here's the thing that profoundly affected me: organization. You need good organization. You need a standard of how things are working. So they actually have those in place, and they're going to do a better job because of it. And I've seen problems associated with not having these things. So let's start with a good organization. Intake, things that you should have. For instance, you see these secretaries lined up here in the picture, and these were two that I sat and worked with. I stood right next to them during this, and this was hours of intaking. They were intaking, I think, for something like 4 hours on these products. And essentially what these two ladies do is people who are bringing in multiple entries, they were there to help keep track of it. So you can see they have sheets in front of them. They have what's called a cheat sheet. They have the intake sheet, and then they'll take down numbers and provide stickers for people who are getting started in their set. So they actually hand write almost every sticker to make sure that it has the number it should have. And part of that is so that they can go and make sure that it's redone if something's wrong. The other thing they have to have is a cheat sheet. So good secretaries are incredibly valuable. But one of the things that they do that I thought was great, that I had not seen in another honey show before I saw this at the Honey Show Training Council, is the secretary's not just there to intake. They don't just take your jar regardless of what's going on or how it looks. They might give with a welcome, they'll welcome you, but with a quiet, neutral welcome. They don't sit there and go, wow, look at that. They had to tell me to stop doing that. Because I'm like, oh my goodness, that's so beautiful. They're like, you're not supposed to be biased. You're supposed to intake an item, not talk to them about it. And so I was like, okay, I can do this. But essentially, they start out and they have a cheat sheet. This is a cheat sheet. What is this? You really need this at every entry, because if somebody has not brought in a product that is ready for entry, being able to tell them it's not ready for entry has value in a nice, polite way, a recommendation. You don't tell them how to do it. You say, oh, maybe you could check that. I see a fingerprint on your jar. So if you're entering a polished jar, you don't want a fingerprint on your jar. Now, whenever you look at this, this is very hard to see. I'm aware it's small, but essentially it has number categories on the side, and each one of those numbers correlates with a category. So whether it's meat, baked goods, whatnot. This had almost 99 categories in this particular show. This is the Knobby Association one. So they have almost 99 categories. The first part of it is they had the numbers. They had the correlating thing. So the number is what's written on the tag. Basically, you're going to write D4 because that number is going to be for, wonderful dessert number, and the category number is 4. And then the correlation. Then how many are supposed to be in the entry? What do I mean by that? Well, for instance, if you're going to take in a candle, do you need 1 or do you need 3 candles? So it's going to tell you how many candles. So if someone walks up with 1 candle and they're trying to enter in this category, you say, well, do you have 2 other candles, so that you're actually completing the requirements for the category. That's why that's important. The next thing is then you're going to see whether or not it needs to be in a bag or on a plate or something like that. And then the correlation and the rules. So the rules are usually this massive document of lots of detailed information. Why that is really interesting. Essentially because Americans don't take anything for granted. We want to push the boundaries. And so if it's not in the rules, we don't have to follow it. You didn't say that. And so a lot of times the rules are very big, actually in the United States more than in Europe. But whenever you're looking at it, it basically says where the page is to find it. So I've had opportunities where that particularly happened, and we had to refer back to it. More on that in a second. The other things you need is claim cards. Claim cards are usually provided, and essentially what it is there's a sticker that goes onto the product that's being turned in, whether it's a cake, whether it is going to be a honey jar, whether it's mead. They're going to put a sticker on the product, and then they're going to put a matching number sticker on your claim card. So when you want to come back and pick it up, you bring in your claim card. The other things you need are rulers and whiteouts, because mistakes will happen. And because you're dealing with a lot of numbers, you got to keep track of everything. All right, being well organized before. Having meetings beforehand, knowing what's going on. First off, a well-run honey show is a joy to be a part of, and it's always a bit of a learning process, but they have meetings beforehand talking about what everyone's expected to do. For every single position I've worked under them, they're like, okay, you are assigned to this. And so having assignment already tells you where you're going to go. That's part of good organization. Being there early to display items. We're always encouraged that if someone is bringing in a display item, they want you to treat it with respect. They want you to show it off with pleasure. And so treating everybody's entry with a level of respect is encouraged, actively told that they're like, treat everybody's entry well. That's why you're not wowing and oohing and awing over one person's entry, because you need to treat everybody's entry with respect. You're meant to be an intaker. You're meant to be doing a good job serving anybody in the community who's competing. And then, of course, organization. So like this is actually a Barbie here, and this is her master list. She's over here looking at all of these like 3 sheets of different documents that are cross-comparing to make sure we don't have, in this case, a doubled, where someone didn't enter twice under the same number set, so we're not getting confused. And so being well organized makes a huge difference. And a lot of times the core of that, the organization, the big picture organization, the head judge, the real details, secretary. And you need both. Now, Whenever those secretaries are intaking, this was the thing that was revolutionary to me that I got a chance to see firsthand. I saw a lot of amazing entries come in over different experiences. But whenever someone was incoming into this particular association, I was sitting right next to Sue and I was taking stuff back and forth and observing what she was doing. I was learning next to her. We had this wonderful lady come in and she brought in a wax block. And it was a good looking wax block. It was presented on a paper plate, which is required. The reason why it's presented on a paper plate is so that we can stick the sticker on the paper plate, not on the block itself, because it won't stick to the block itself. So it has to be on a paper plate. So she had this paper plate and she had this wonderful wax block. But here's the thing. The rules require that you turn it in with a bag around it, a plastic 1-gallon bag. And so Miss Sue sitting there knew that something was off. It didn't look like all the other entries. She said, hang on one second. I'm not sure this is quite right. She goes to her cheat sheet, finds where it is, flips to it in the rules, and it's this, big set of rules, flips to it in the rules, and she looks at it and says, okay, it's required that it's in a bag. And she turns it around, shows it to this lady. Takes the time to do this. This is about teaching the people who are coming in and bringing stuff. Taking the time to do this, I think, has so much value. So she turns it around and says, hey, you see this right here? It requires a bag. This is such a beautiful block. I want to make sure that it's properly turned in so that you have the benefit of it. And she's like, okay, I can find a bag. We literally set the entry aside, or she took the entry with her and she came back in and she had a bag and she turned it in said bag as it was supposed to be in. And we're like, great, perfect. Paper plate inside, bag on there, tag on there, turned it in. I came back, and this is where it really makes an impact, because this is a very competitive. Wax block is a very competitive field in this one. There's giant wax block, little wax block, mini wax blocks. They're just all sorts. It's a huge show, very competitive, especially in wax. And I come back, and after the show was done, she's standing next to the table where her wax block is, and she sees me because she knew I was standing there. And she says, look, it's first place. And she said, it wouldn't have placed without the proper container. She's like, she literally looked at me. She says, I'm so glad you guys told me that you showed me that. She's like, it probably won me this first place ribbon. It could be the difference between first and third, or first and none. And that was where it really clicked and came home for me, that this is about teaching people with grace and with joy. And the attitude in which they're teaching them, like she took the time to look it up and show her where she might want to do something different, can make a difference. The attitude in which they do it is one of the things that they train. And I really appreciate that, because it's not always a part of every honey show. I've been a part of plenty. I should know. But taking the time to teach. Entries handled with care. One of the things I also appreciate is if there's a mistake made, there's a reason for it. So this is actually a picture by Kim Townsend, and you can see this creamed honey. Note the white gloves up and down on the jar. The jars were all carried very carefully like this, because you did not want to tip or move the jar, because how clean it is and how perfect it is one of the things that mattered. So we were always told, walk smoothly and carefully. Don't wear shoes you can't walk in. No crazy. No bedazzled, but essentially bring it carefully, treat it with respect. That's back to the respect. They are telling us that as honey judges and stewards, that we treat every product that comes in here with respect, regardless of how it looks or how well it's presented. We treat it like it's gold. And so carefully brought it in. Here's the other cool thing about that. They have a system for if it's bad. What if you trip? What if you fall with this jar? And I've had this happen. I had somebody come by and go, oh, that's cool. They picked it up and turned it sideways. And everyone went, no! And just screamed at poor folks. That was recent, actually. But essentially, you can't pick it up and turn it sideways. Well, if a mistake is made and it's caught, the system is immediately the number of that item is noted. And it's not because anything's wrong. If it's really bad, if something's damaged, we may go to that person and say, hey, do you have a backup? Or would you like to fix this? If something's off kilter, if something's bad, like say it's a machinery item that got broken, we're like, would you like to come fix it? They'll actually go and tell them something went wrong. We're going to get you in here. So you have the best chance possible of winning, because we want to make sure this is fair for you. The other thing is if it's something simple like, oh, a honey jar got tipped, then they're going to make a note of it, make a note of what happened. So when the judge sits down to judge it, guess what? There's going to be a card in front of it that says, this honey jar was tipped and grabbed by bare hands. Discard any fingerprints and any honey on lid. If there's a cat hair floating in it, guess what? They're going to count that down. But if it's just got honey on the lid, they know that probably occurred during the time that they were there. So make sure that there's a system for if something goes bad. And usually it's immediately brought to the head judge as well, so that it's well known. Judges. So this is actually a great picture of judges. You see the little house that's in front of it? That's a little mouse house. And what they are doing, and why you see all these people are clustered around it, is it was a competitor for best of show. There were 3 items for best of show. What ended up winning was candles, but basically everybody took time to look at these 3 items that were for best of show and competingly challenge each other on why an item should be best of show. And so it was amazing. But the idea that as a judge, it is not about what you want. It's not about your personal preference. And here's a really prime example of it. The lady in the forefront touching the house with the white blonde hair, I sat with her. We judged arts and crafts. This was one of the things that we judged. And we sat down, and one of the items that was in arts and crafts that she loved was a bee carved out of wood. Now, the problem was it was partially done by AI. And in the rules, it specifically prohibits AI use for anything that you're making. And so it was her favorite. She's like, I want to give that one the first place. Look at it. It is so beautiful. It's striking. It really incorporates bees into every element of it because that's important. But she did not choose her preference. She chose the preference for what was compliant with the rules. It wasn't about what she wanted. It is about what is correct, whether or not it is working for the group, or whether or not it is a proper product that incorporates bees. For instance, if something doesn't incorporate bees, it's not going to be as well received because it may be beautiful art, but is it bee related? This is a honey show first and foremost. All right, so categories. Would you mind getting the lights? So this is where categories come in. The number one thing that I was told when I started looking into the Honey Show Training Council is that the things that are going to be first and foremost in a honey show, shocker, I know, are honey. There are subcategories under that. So subcategories under that is you're going to have things like different colors of honey. And I have some examples here. So if you take a look right here, you're going to see light honey, you're going to see amber honey, and you're going to see dark honey. And how do we know that? Take a look at these. These are what's called grading glasses. So there's an actual system of grading glasses. This is much easier than the P scale. If anybody's seen a P scale, it's a beast. And it's like this huge flip book. Essentially, it's really big. This is much simpler. So 3 basic color categories. If it's darker than this, then it's dark. If it's lighter than this, then it's light. If it's lighter than this, then it's light. If it's darker than this, then it's amber. So it allows you to have a nice, clean categorization of what's going on. I've seen people make mistakes on this, so it makes a big difference. Other things are like wax. Other things under honey would be like black jar honey, or for instance, if you're working with creamed honey, cut comb honey, chunk honey, all of those would be subcategories under honey. And then, of course, wax. Wax is a very big part of this as well, but arts and crafts. So wax products are big. These are wax figurines, but you can have wax candles, molded, crafted. It doesn't matter. These are cute little monkey fist knots, but essentially these are wax candles. And some of the things that they're judging on are things I never even thought. So when I first sat down, I sat down with Brett's English. He was the head judge at the time. And we were over there and I'm like, how do you judge a candle? Well, of course, smooth and pretty is nice, but how do you judge it beyond that? They're all smooth and pretty. And it was like, is the wick well centered? Was the wick dipped? Did it have the appropriate dipping? Then beyond that, is it cut to the correct length? Does it follow the rules? One of the things that you'll see if you want to ever come up here, you'll actually see that one of these candles, the wick is sitting up by the surface. The wick floated and moved to the side. So this would actually be marked down. As beautiful as it is from a distance, as well centered as it is in the middle, it's actually floating up to the edge. And so this is going to be a poorly marked candle. And it could mean the difference between first place or no placement. And so it's one of those things taking the time. So I actually want to encourage you guys, if you want to come up for a second, let me show you some differences in these wax blocks. Come on, there's not that many people. Besides, you guys need to wake up. I'm big on the fun. So I know I'm totally giving it away. When it comes to jars, cleanliness, how much honey is on the lid. You can see these have an uber fancy plastic piece. I don't want to see any sediment or gunk in the top of the lid. I want to see a clear product. every judge has a honey judging kit. So when they go in, one of the things that they always have is they always have a light with them. So let me see, got to turn this on. Look at how bright this light is. Now, can anyone want to get down? Can you see any problems with this jar? Because I can tell you there's a problem with it. Tell me what you see. Come closer.
It's cloudy.
It is cloudy.
That's something on the edge.
Yeah, so beyond just having the plastic wrap sticking out, it's dirty on the outside. It's cloudy.
I can see from back here.
Yeah, it's got fingerprints. This, I mean, the jar may be beautiful when you turn it in, but so many people don't know to keep it clean. By the way, glasses cleaner works really well.
Bubble inside.
And there's a bubble inside. Now, one of the things that's interesting is this is actually sediment on the outside. But if there's a flaw in the jar, this changed the way I was doing it. So I'd always been taught, you got to have perfect jars. You got to look through every jar to find a jar. Well, guess what? The Honey Show Training Council is like, guess what? Beekeepers can control the jar. You don't want a big flaw. You don't want a big streak through the middle of it. But if it's not visible when you're just looking at it, they're not going to count you down for a wave in the glass, because almost all honey jars actually have some recycled glass as a part of them. So not judging someone on something they can't control. That was a big thing. Nobody had ever really defined the difference for me. So making sure that you know what you're looking at and being able to properly grade it. Now, the other thing is, and this is easier to see, is take a look at these wax blocks. What do you see that's different between them? So this one is a brighter color, right? It's a better color. This one's darker. They're different heights. So in this case, the Texas show,
You would weigh them to make sure.
you would weigh them to make sure, but the Texas show requires that it's between 1 and 2 pounds. So you got a lot of give there. So the height is not as important. It just can't be too high. Actually, 1.5 inches, can't be more than 1.5 inches. The other thing is check out the junk on the top.
The bloom.
This is called bloom, but if you touch it, it has a texture to it. But if you look at the trash. There's a hair in this block. Guess what? This block is not going to grade well. And that's the thing that we're looking for. We're looking for quality of the product. So even though this is a brighter color, bigger block, guess what's going to win? This is not a prime example, but this one would win over that one because the flaws ingrained into it. So these are the sorts of things they're talking about and looking for, like if it has scratches or mars. In this case, this one didn't cool down. The rippling is caused by cooling, things like that. Now, if you guys want to see the wick floating to the top? Now, the other 2 candles could be perfect because it requires 3 candles for entry. But if the wick is floating to the top, this candle is not going to work. The other thing is of course, measuring. They're going to measure, is this compliant? So in the Texas Association, it can't be over a certain number of inches. So this is under that number of inches. How long is the wick? Well, it's supposed to be 1/2 inch. Is it a 1/2 inch wick? Good. If it's way up here, guess what? It's not good. But that's only if they specify it. If the judges don't ever, or if the rules don't specify the wick length, you can have wick this long and they're not going to grade you down for it. It's not very functional, but it doesn't matter because the rules don't specify it. So that's one thing where the rules actually really, really matter. All right, you guys can go sit down. That is called bloom, but in this case, I think it's actually a molding error. So if you touch it, you'll feel the texture. Bloom is when it gets cold, it gets a sheen to it. You can buff it out. All right, you can turn off the light again if you're okay with that. That's the last of needing to see the examples. All right, I better get kicking. So this is an example of some of the wonderful wax products that you can see. Like a candle should exhibit whether or not it can burn beautifully. It needs to have a proper descriptor card. Any product that they're working with is like that. Now, again, what is the purpose of the Honey Show? The purpose of the Honey Show is to show off all bee-related products and art projects that are associated with bees, right? This was something, again, revolutionary for me. So I sat down with Brett's English that first time I did it, and we sat down to judge cakes. And he opened up a cake and he leaned back in his chair and went, oh my goodness, that's why we do this shit. And I went, excuse me? And he's like, look at this cake. It was chocolate ganache cake with a phyllo dough crust and caramelized nuts on it and feathering on top. It was the most gorgeous cake you've ever seen. He's like, but he looks at me and says, but if this cake does not exhibit the taste and flavor of honey, this cake is not a winner. And I went, you're joking. This is like, we opened all the other boxes. It was the prettiest cake there. By the way, it did win, but it had to taste like honey. It had to exhibit the flavor of the item that we're supposed to be showing off. The other thing is again, Don't judge them for things they have no control over. So the next cake we go to is a yeasted German style cake. It's a beautiful cake, but essentially it's a yeasted dough that you bake, and it's akin to a bread, but it's a cake. And I tasted, like, oh, well, it's stale. He's like, no, no, no. And I went, excuse me? And he's like, this cake has been sitting here for 24 hours. This type of cake gets stale very quickly. He's like, they probably baked it at their house, put it in the car to cool, and they clearly just put the cream on it before they turned it in. They brought it here as quick and as easy as they could. But the truth is this cake just gets stale because it had to sit here for a day before we judged it. He's like, so we're not going to grade them down on that. What we need to know, is the crumb good? Does it have elements of honey throughout it? Is the composition good? Did they do a good job on the recipe card? Like, all those other elements matter, but the stuff the beekeeper or the competitor can't control is not what we judge on. And that blew my mind, because I probably would have graded that person down for having a stale cake, but it's not something they could control. And so that is the beauty of somebody who has practice judging, is that they don't judge so harshly. I'm probably a little harsher. I've learned to soften it back a little bit, but I had to be like, it's bad. And they're like, no, no, no. We've got to give them a fair chance and ask, does it comply? Does it work with what they're doing? So judges have a hard job. And you can see this is Danielle Fioletto back here, and they're judging arts and crafts. Arts and crafts are not the same at all. In this case, you can see a quilt, you can see a box, you can see an encaustic piece of art. And back behind the lady who's smiling in the picture straight at us with dark hair, Danielle Fioletto's head, is a blanket. And guess what won? That blanket. It was a crocheted blanket. And here's why it won. It was perfect. There were no strings hanging off. There was no little tidbits. There was nothing wrong with it, right? It was a beautiful piece of work. Because of that, it also had all the elements of beekeeping in it. It had hexagon-shaped little, hexagons inside of there that made the blanket up. It had bees crocheted into the hexagons. It had little bumps on top of the hexagons that were little bee-shaped crochet stitches. It had a stitch around the edge that was all bee themed. Guess what? It won on being the arts and crafts that showed off the most bee elements and theming of the whole thing. And it was also beautiful. Guess what? It placed extremely well at NABI as well. I think it won a first place ribbon there. So it was a beautiful piece of work, and there's a reason it won first. But arts and crafts, what you're judging on is, does it incorporate bees and the products of bees, and or does it do a really good job of compositional work? So is it finished properly? Does it have clean lines? Is it properly done? Like, does it have threads sticking out all over? Guess what? They're going to get marked down for that, because it's not good craftsmanship. Was it handmade, or was it made by a machine? Guess what? They're going to get marked differently, because if it was handmade, they put more work into it. And so it's graded on different things. For instance, I'm going to give an example. This isn't an example of the box, but if the box had been rough and bumpy, it probably would have been graded poor, because it wasn't finished. And back to arts and crafts, one of the things that's important, when the craftsmanship is undeniable, when it's a beautiful piece of work and there's no ability to say this one's better than this one, it goes back to the rules. Does it follow the rules? Because you've got to have a standard by which you're judging. So for instance, this one incorporates lots of honey. It has beautiful artmanship, and it did do very well. But it also wasn't just a box of mice. It had beeswax candles, creamed honey, little honey straws, little honey jar. It had bee supplies wallpapering the back. On the other side of it, it was a clock that said time for honey. So this thing, did very well because it incorporated lots of bee-related items. The next thing is you see these are actually individual frame holders for a cut comb. So they're meant to be beautiful. Well, guess what? The two on the end there, the requirement is in the rules that you have a handle and that the judges have the ability to get into it. So if you look at this one, it has the most gorgeous finish, and it's beautiful right on the end, but no handle. The next one over, screws, no way to get in. Not that, of course, we couldn't get a screw gun out, but if it's the difference between the one that has the ability to unlatch and open versus go get a screw gun, one's more compliant with the rules than the other. And so those two would not have graded as well, but that's just what it is. Now, beverages with honey, I'm not even going to get into that because we're actually a little low on time. Making sure that their products are higher qualities. Not all items are the same. For instance, beeswax has to have a nice smell. If you walk in, your beeswax is pure white and smells like chemicals, guess what? We're not going to grade it very highly. So certain things like that. Now, back to method. Method is really important because everybody has a different method. These are actually our Texas associations, and if you look at our scorecards, you're actually going to see numbers on the side. So we have an award called the Ann Harmon Award, which requires that it has a numerical value to someone winning. So they're actually attributed points according to how good it is, at least at last convention. I don't know if it's different this time or not, but so essentially there's an Ann Harmon Award that we have to have numbers. So even though it's a Honey Show Training Council show, it has a number scoring, which is different from what most of the time the Honey Show does. They rely on comments and negatives. So if there's a negative, they'll put a mark there. But you'll notice there's no numbers on this thing. It is because it's done through discourse. So they actually will write notes on the bottom, and an individual judge will be responsible for one category normally. So for the winners of that category, they will decide on it and they'll write comments accordingly, but it's not a numerical system because they don't want somebody coming in who won third in one category of, say, light honey, because they were judged by someone else, because everyone grades slightly different. Someone who was judged in light honey and got like a 98 score, but only a third place, and the person who got a 98 score, but got first place in dark honey. And so they don't want the comparison. You're going to see a slight difference in that. Now, organization is top importance. Why do I say this again? Because I had a honey show where this went south. I had a honey show for my private club, and somebody who frankly did not care about intaking was like somebody's child. And by accident, this individual let in 2 honey jars into one category, done by the same lady. So she won first and second because she did a great job. She won first and second. And she didn't realize it until afterwards. I got a phone call 3 days later with her sobbing on the phone going, I feel so bad. I took away somebody's award. I took away somebody's award. Can I give it back? And she hasn't entered a honey show yet because of that experience. So bad organization makes people stop. So it's so important to be well organized, which is what I find important. The other thing that was revolutionary, and this is my personal preference, is they don't award ribbons unless you've earned it. So what do I mean by that? They judge on the industry standard. And for those of you who've been a part of a honey show, you walk in and there's one person who's entered into creamed honey. There's nobody else. And you're like, well, I see the first place right there because it's the only place. We just presume it's going to get first, right? Because it's the only one competing. Wrong. The American Honey Show Training Council acts upon the principle that they give awards to a product that is superior to all other products and does a good job of displaying the best of that particular product. So for instance, if you didn't earn a first place, they may give out a first and a second, and they may not give out a third because there wasn't anyone in the third position. And or they may give out no ribbons in a given category. They're not required to. If there's that one creamed honey and that one creamed honey had a hair in it, guess what? They're not going to give it a first, third, or second place. It's going to get none of that. And so not everybody likes that. I will tell you my personal preference. I love that. It makes me want to compete because it means that if I win a first, it's actually really good. It means I earned that first against everyone they've ever judged against. It means it's a great product. For instance, I had one of the honey judges, I had the privilege of winning first place in mead last year, and Pam. Neither one of us were a part of first place in a spicy mead, so it was a specialty mead. Not in every category. Heather won in some of the other categories. But essentially, I got a first place ribbon. And she came up to me afterward and she said, that is one of the best meads I've ever tasted because you can taste the honey, you can taste the habanero, you can taste the pineapple. And I'm like, thank you, because she's grading against everything she's ever tasted. It's not just, is it a decent mead for the group of meads that were subpar here, which I'm not saying subpar, but you get the idea. Is it the best meat that is available on the shelf? Is it exhibiting the very top quality? I love that. And so it makes me want to compete more. It actually has caused me to enter honey shows I would not otherwise enter because I was like, I don't need a ribbon, whatever. So a little bit of competitive spirit. This is actually our Texas display. I saw the boxes out there. I have a feeling it's going to go back up. Again, treat people's entries with respect. This is showing them respect by displaying them with beauty and enthusiasm. So make that an average part of what you're doing. So again, it's important. What it does is it raises the industry standard whenever you have people competing in honey shows. When it's a competitive market, you're usually going to get a higher quality of market. People are not bringing their honey in a peanut butter jar. They're bringing it in pretty jars because it's a beautiful product and they want to show it off. That's the idea, is that it raises the level of what the industry has to offer through people participating. Now, Judges, of course, are providing judgment, but one of the best things is they're available to talk to you afterwards. A lot of the time, these judges are actually trained to say who we are serving are the people who are out there who are putting their stuff in to judge it. And so they will oftentimes, like in this particular show, they stood beside the table they judged when people would come up and have questions about why it was judged that way or what made this block better than that one. They would sit there and teach them. That's the beauty of this. It's meant to be a teaching opportunity to do the very best. And you can learn a lot. I was sitting there going, oh yes, really? Polish with this particular item? Straying your honey with women's underwear? I know a guy who does that. I'm not joking. Clean underwear, but he uses undergarments. Actually, to preface that, there was once a cowboy, a priest, and a farmer sitting at a bar. And the priest says, how do you make your honey so clean? And the old farmer says, well, I don't want to tell you. And the old cowboy starts chuckling. And he says, I get clean women's underwear and I strain all my honey through unused women's undergarments because it's got the finest mesh. And I never get any particles in my honey because it doesn't let off fibers. And the priest is like, I just don't know how to go buy this stuff. And that is a true story. And I can give you all those people's names. All right, so making sure that it's for the people. It always should be done in such a way that it presents people's items with display and care, and that you're going to do a good job of doing it. That is the core of what we're doing. Training and offering comments is so important. So you see how there are cards next to all of them? This is one of the core things. Judges write comments. They say stuff like, hey, you know, your wax block, let's take this wax block that had junk in it. Your wax block was a beautiful shape, and I loved the brightness of the color. Positives. You might try filtering it just a little. You might try filtering it with a finer grain. And they didn't say, I noticed a cat hair in the corner. Not a negative comment, just a recommendation. So they're trying to teach while doing this without degrading people. They tell us whenever we're writing cards, you don't just put on the words, your honey tasted like honey robber. It was gross. Guess what? I've tasted it. Dodie and I were sitting there. We're like, ah! But you don't just say this honey was nasty. You say maybe check whether or not your honey robber is on a little long. You know, you didn't say it was gross. Or you might say decrystallization might help this have no crystals in the bottom, or something with a recommendation. But with that, make sure to comment on like, oh, your jar lid was perfectly clean and I didn't see any bubbles in it. So bring a positive into it. They actually had an entire class that was done by Pam that was on how to write good comment cards. They can't be boring. They can't be one word. She's like, I got a comment card that said good. She's like, that doesn't tell me anything. What was good? What do I need to do again? So make sure that the comment cards are actually well written. That is a very core principle by which they operate. Education first. These are just some great pictures from that particular event. This lady right here with her husband, the older lady up at the top, she's the one who made the little mouse house. She's the one who made the little clock. And she won most ribbons of anyone else in that entire show, and she never kept any of the items. She gave them away before she left. She handmade and hand cut the wood for that dollhouse herself, or mouse house. And it's just really cool to see her enthusiasm. She just wanted to do it to show people how cool it could be. So yeah, making sure that all of this is practiced and that you are running your honey show with organization and care for the people who are a part of it. I think the American Honey Show Training Council, what they really give is they make sure that people are taken care of. People are educated. This is about training people to do it not only well, but to treat others with dignity while doing it through good organization and other means. So this was actually a quote that was sent out by Michael Young. This is a picture of Michael Young. He is a Welsh honey judge. He was the individual who originally brought the honey judge program to the United States, and it actually hasn't been in the United States for that long, but it's quickly growing in popularity. All right, thank you, everybody. I hope you have a great day. Any questions?
So how many honey shows have you entered?
Before or after I started participating with the honey show, I don't remember. I've been doing this for a long time. I don't remember. I didn't enter in a lot before this, probably more after. I've entered in 3 in the past year. But I did before, and I just don't remember because that was years and years and years. I just don't remember. What about you? How many have you entered in?
is I'm stewarding most of them or chair of all the TBA ones, and I don't travel to any other states to do this. So
I don't usually either.
I've gotten 2 ribbons from Texas, and I've got 1 from ABF.
Yes, sir.
Did you start all this as when you became Collin County Honey Queen?
I'm amazed you remember that. I was the Collin County Honey Queen. So that was where I first got a taste of judging. Because one of the things they often did is you would be a participant in judging honey. You would sit down with someone who would teach you. So I actually had more training than a lot of people did. So yes, for judging, but competing, they started me as a scholarship student. You were required to compete your first year with your first like couple jars of honey where you were so proud. And you know what? I've continued that. Actually, I ran the scholarship program for 9 years, and we normally have kids win every year in our honey show, which I love.
Did you come from a family of beekeepers?
Not at all. The question being, did I come from a family of beekeepers? We had bees in our water meter box when I was like 10, and I kept pestering my mom about it, and she would give me jars of like strawberry jelly, sugar water, Dr. Pepper, and she'd send me out in the bee house and she'd say, see which one they like best. And so I'd sit there and watch the bees come in to eat the food. And I found out they like Dr. Pepper best because they're good Texas bees. And they also have good caffeine receptors. So they like the caffeine, they're buzzed. Because of that, I really was interested in, she found the scholarship program through that. So not a single person in my family keeps bees, they just tolerate my hobby. They said, as long as you're happy. So I'm a very passionate beekeeper, but nobody in my family is. Not one person. Any other questions?
No question. So I'm going to make you the Texas honey czar.
Zarb.
Czar. Yeah. So you're in charge with developing a certification program, getting more clubs involved with honey judging, submit samples. What would you do?
I can't even get my own club in it. They're like, change something? No.
For growing a honeybee, was there anything that changed that you would change based on the certification system you already have available? Like anything? Like you're the czar, you're in charge of anything. So you
Okay, if I was king of the world, basically is what you're saying. What was the question to find that? What would I change? That's tough. I probably would encourage more programs. I think I would change the closed-mindedness of a lot of clubs if I had a magic wand to wave. Because a lot of the problems is that you get people who have been in clubs for a long time. I'm among them, I should know. And they're like, this is the way we've always done it. And you're like, yes, but this way doesn't work anymore. Or there's something new out there. Now, that being said, I'm a curmudgeon about changing what I want to do with my hives. I'm like, nope, this has worked for 4 millennia. Why do I need to change how I'm requeening or what have you? So I'm a hypocrite. But when it comes to clubs, people get incredibly passionate about clubs. They're like, this is my club. I've worked hard. My blood, sweat, and tears are in this. And they start closing out anyone who offers a different opinion or does it differently than them, rather than having an open hand about how things are run and realizing it's not their baby. And so if I had a magic wand, that's what I would change about it. Because, for instance, I love honey shows. I think that they would be awesome. I would love to see my local club's honey show be one that would be regional, where anyone, even if they're in Oklahoma, could come down and volunteer as a steward and gain credits. Or if they wanted to compete, because like we have lots of little honey clubs around us, but most of them are not big enough to have a show. So having a show that services those people and brings them in rather than saying, no, we're better. I hate that idea. That's not us. That's not who we should be. And it's a far way to fall too. So I definitely have an opinion about that. That would be me if I was king of the world, but.
Yeah, maybe think. So are the participants or the entrants to these shows outside of the honey and the wax, are they mostly beekeepers, or do you have a lot of?
Primarily hobbyist beekeepers. Usually if it's an arts and crafts, you may see a family member, but most of the time it is going to be beekeepers. So the biggest thing is hobbyists. And here's why. I believe, my opinion is that a commercial beekeeper, someone who does this for a profession, is not going to readily enter into a show, because if they don't win, it looks bad. Or if they get second place to another company in honey, they're like, but my honey tastes as good, but they got a first place. They don't want that on their record, and so they'll avoid it in whole. I think that's one of the big problems when it comes to joining the master beekeeping program, is that people who are working in the field don't want to be subjective to somebody who maybe has less experience than them. And I'm not saying that is anything. You guys all have loads of experience, but it's something where you have to put yourself into submission to someone else to practice a program. And when it comes to the Honey Show Training Council, when it comes to the Master Beekeeping Program, the attitude of grace and the attitude that everyone can be learned from, no matter if they've been doing it 5 years less than you or not, makes a huge difference. And so it's about our attitude handling it. And so many people have an attitude about how much they know. Those beekeepers who are like, I'm the only way to do it, and I know the right way, and you guys can all take a hike, are the people who polarize groups and prevent people from wanting to do awesome programs like this or grow. To grow, sometimes you have to realize you're not always right. Okay, enough philosophy from me. I don't know why I went down that path.
Because you're the
Yeah, the honey czar. The honey czar is getting philosophizing. There's a card in, I think it's Cards Against Humanity, or a different version thereof, that's like, could be a philosopher without a drink. I got that card. All right, sorry.
What are your thoughts on cream honey and that My Cream Pal?
I have not tried it. Oh, the question being, what's my difference? My question between creamed honey or My Cream Pal? I've not tried it. I don't know.
So the machine that creams the honey.
Yes.
To infinity.
Yeah.
Versus somebody who's doing it by hand. And
don't have the answer.
do you let that cream pal honey into the honey show?
I haven't experienced working with it, so before I say or have an opinion, I'm going to find out about it. I'm going to learn about it before I say something. And that's the thing that I think a lot of people realize about me when I go in to teach classes about beekeeping. I'm like, okay, here's my opinion, but also here's the data that I've collected that has created this opinion. And guess what? My opinion's not developed on that, so I can't give you an answer. I don't have good data.
I'm gonna be the time czar.
Be the time czar.
Do we want to take 10 minutes? We need to give Dan a few minutes to set up.
I'll get my stuff cleared away. Thank you so much for being here.